Well, despite President Trump's insisting that the leaders of Ukraine and Russia sit down to put an end to that war, officials in Russia are now throwing cold water on that idea. Joining us now is NBC Washington correspondent Alice Barr. Hello, Alice. Talk to us about why Russia's foreign minister is now talking about a road to nowhere.
Good morning. Yeah, with some new comments from Sergei Lavrov. He is the top diplomat in Russia. He said that having discussions among Western leaders, like we saw just yesterday, NATO military leaders, leaders from the U.S., talking about security guarantees for Ukraine's future without having Russia at the table, that's what he called a road to nowhere. He also said that it's necessary to have some lower level negotiations before we can have this much anticipated meeting between Russian President Putin and Ukrainian President Zelensky. So that's kind of the cold water being thrown on the idea that President Trump has said he wants to see this kind of a summit happen very shortly, and then he wants to have a separate meeting to follow that would include himself, so Putin, Zelensky, and Trump. But to hear it from Russia, they don't seem to be in any rush to get to that kind of a leaders summit. They want these lower level talks first, and they're saying, it's sort of nice that you're having all these discussions. We've seen all these heads of state from various European leaders talking, but Russia's saying if we're not sitting there, then you might as well be yelling into the wind.
Seems like the president from Ukraine has been getting a little bit more support to support his cause. Now he had some new comments from overnight. What did he have to say?
Yeah, he was speaking about exactly this, security guarantees for Ukraine. And when we talk about this, he's talking about wanting to know exactly what and how far his allies in Europe and in the U.S. are willing to go to offer protections for Ukraine when and if this war finally ends. It's not just about the war ending, it's about the day after and ensuring that Russia does not just launch new attacks potentially from new territory if Ukraine winds up having to cede some of this territory they've been battling for in the east. Then the concern has been that just gives Russia even more of a launching pad to get closer to, say, Kyiv in what would then be Russian territory. So they want very specific, we heard this from one of Zelensky's top aides, they want very concrete, specific, effective agreements because they have had past times when there have been sort of broad agreements made between Ukraine and some European leaders, for instance, giving up nuclear weapons in Ukraine because powers in the West said, we'll protect you from future attacks. And then future attacks came anyway. And they're saying we can't have that kind of a mistake this time. So before, also, there's going to be a meeting, this leaders summit. Ukraine has some of its own conditions that they want a better understanding about these security guarantees. And that's really what we're hearing from Zelensky now.
Yeah. Alice, on a separate front, there seems to be some major developments out of the war in Gaza. Catch us up on the latest there.
Yeah, Israel launched strikes on Gaza City overnight, part of a new offensive that's just beginning and is coming despite international condemnation and growing protests at home in Israel as well. Israel is calling this the first stages of a planned assault that includes up to 60,000 troops, sending civilians fleeing once again and only adding to fears about the starvation crisis. Israeli forces also struck cities in the south and center of the Strip overnight, and all of this is throwing ceasefire talks into question. There had been some hopes raised as Hamas said it was accepting a new proposal put forward by Arab leaders, but that proposal does not seem to be palatable to Israel. Israel's prime minister is again defending his approach that he says this new offensive is going to target remaining Hamas strongholds, and he's holding to his belief that Hamas must be entirely eliminated in order to end the war and to bring home the remaining hostages.
All right, Alice Barr, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate you.